Hello, everybody. Welcome. What a wonderful crowd we have today. It's so nice to see all of you here. My name is Katie Gledisai, and I am the director here at McFarland Senior Outreach. I'd like to welcome you all here. I have a few announcements before we get started with our presentation for today. We have a few events happening here in McFarland, and all are welcome. You do not need to be a McFarland resident, obviously, to attend our programs. I don't know if you know it or not, but this coming week is Social Connection Awareness Week. And one of the primary initiatives at McFarland Senior Outreach is we are trying to prevent social isolation and loneliness for seniors, which is an epidemic in our country. So we are trying to promote more programs to get older adults to come together for events similar to these. So if you would like to play Senior Social Connection Bingo, that is what we're playing this month. There are cards over here, and what you do is each block or each square on your bingo card is a different event that either we're doing here or at the library across the street or at the bowling alley. Each time you attend one, you cross it off, and if you get 4 in a row, you bring it back here, you put it into a door prize drawing, and you could win a door prize drawing of 2 ticket vouchers for a show of your choice at the Stoughton Opera House. Thank you, Stoughton Opera House. And a gift certificate for a dinner at Palenque Mexican Restaurant here in town. Thank you, Palenque Mexican Restaurant. So the drawing will happen on December 5th. So if you would like to participate, there's plenty of cards over there. I encourage you to do so, and we would love to see you here if you can. A couple of other things we have coming up. We have 5 spots left for our AARP Smart Driver course, which is this Friday afternoon from 1 to 5. If you're interested in taking that course, you might even get a discount on your car insurance. So let me know if you might be interested in registering for that. And we have our Caring Quilts reception and gallery opening that's happening across the street at the library on Saturday, November 15th from 10 a.m. to noon. So that should be a great program. You get to see all of the quilts that volunteers have made throughout 2025. They'll be displayed at the library from November 15th through the end of the year, and then they will be distributed to older adults in the community who could use a little extra love and care. They're not for sale, but you can enjoy them for a couple of months. A little bit of housekeeping. If you do need to use the restroom, it's through these doors and to the left. The women's is right around the corner. The men's is a little further down past the bubbler. This presentation is going to be recorded. So I know there were some people who called in who really wanted to come today at the last minute, but we are full to the gills. So unfortunately, they couldn't attend, but it will be recorded. It will be posted on our website. So if you would like to look back at that. Since it's being recorded, I'm going to ask you all to take a moment, get out your cell phones, and go ahead and turn them off so that it doesn't disrupt the presentation. We are going to have a Q&A after the presentation. I do have a microphone, and I will bring that around if you have a question, just so everyone can hear you, okay? After the presentation, we do have cookies and coffee. The cookies are thanks to Fosdal's Bakery in Stoughton. John will also have some books for sale, and he'll be signing books. I see some of you came in with your book, so he would be happy to sign that. We hope you can stay around and mingle for a while and enjoy some light refreshments. I would like to also thank our other sponsor, which is U.S. Vets General Contracting, LLC, that provided a very generous donation to be able to bring John here today. So thank you to that McFarland area business. Now, I would love to recognize all the veterans who are here today. So if you would like to be recognized and you're a veteran, can you stand up for me? Thank you. Thank you. And I would also like to recognize a special veteran. We have a World War II veteran who is here today, who is also 100 years old, Walter Whitehorse, right over here. Again, thank you so much for your service. I'm glad you could be here today. So, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker. You're probably tired of hearing me speak. So, John Armbruster earned a journalism degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and began his career writing environmental science stories. He later wrote for two Wisconsin newspapers, the La Crosse Tribune and the Marshfield News Herald. John returned to UW-Madison and earned his secondary education degree in social studies. He later completed a Master's of Education degree at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin. John recently retired after a 30-year career teaching a variety of history and government courses to middle and high school students. John lives on a small farm in the heart of the Driftless region in southwest Wisconsin. He has two adult sons, Matthew and Joe. Can you please welcome author John Armbruster?
Thank you very much, Katie. Wow, there aren't many seats left. Thank you very much. But as I told Katie when we were outside the door there, I said, I don't mean to be immodest, but this has actually happened quite a bit. The book came out 3 years ago. This is speech number somewhere between 140 and 150. And I've got 3 next week. I don't have a Veterans Day open until 2028, so I'm scheduled at lots of events, so it's taken me by surprise as well. The response, particularly in Wisconsin, to my book, Tailspin. And in those 140 to 150 speeches, I've met about a dozen World War II veterans, make that 13. Walter, I heard some stories about you before, and your generation sure has a lot of stories. I understand you met Queen Elizabeth, but she was princess at the time? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You're a lot like the main character, Gene Moran. I'll tell you about him later. Yeah, he also liked girls. I heard something you weren't supposed to, but you winked at Queen Elizabeth and she blushed. Is that true?
Not quite.
Okay, well, okay, maybe the story is bigger than the rumor. All right. I'm gonna leave that not quite alone, okay? But yeah, a real honor. You were in the Navy, correct? And what was your job in the Navy?
Radar.
A radar operator on a ship?
Yeah, radar is it's on everything.
Okay, all right, okay.
A destroyer and a communication ship.
Okay, so on 2 different ships during World War II. So yes, I'd spend anytime I meet someone from that generation, and as a kid I was a World War II buff and a history buff, and it's a pleasure to meet you. So, but we got another guy that liked girls like you, Walter. Gene Moran. Gene he would have been 101. He passed away 11 years ago. Gene and I worked together for 3 years before he died, and it took me another 8 years to finish. And yes, he is famously known as the man from Wisconsin that fell 4 miles without a parachute and lived. And I'm here to tell you about that story today. Now, as Katie mentioned, there'll be a Q&A session, and because we have a big crowd, if I don't get to your questions, I'm going to be sitting over there signing and selling books, and I'll be here as long as you want, so I'll answer any question that you have. But if you get a chance to take a look, I got some of Gene's World War II memorabilia over there, donated from the family, some pictures and actual mementos from the war. For those of you who've read the book, there was a diary that Gene kept with him, a scrapbook. That actual scrapbook, which is over 80 plus years, is actually over there, sealed in a plastic wrap there, but the family lent that out to me. And also over here, there are some newspaper articles. You'll notice 2 panels. The one on the left are articles from World War II. And then the rest are from fairly recently, before Gene died. And yes, there's a big gap in between those articles, and there's a reason why. It's why I'm here today. But like I said, Gene and I worked together for 3 years. I first heard about the story when I got my first full-time teaching job at North Crawford Schools in Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin. So we are in Dane County, and that's Crawford County, southwest Wisconsin. About a 2-hour drive from here, a little over 2 hours. And I was a new rookie teacher, my first full-time teaching job. And I'm from central Wisconsin, Marshfield. And I had very flat country up there. I'd never been to the Driftless region, and so I didn't know anybody. But I don't know if there's any educators out there, but you have that in-service week before the kids come, and I didn't know anybody. And during a break, people left to make small talk, and I just sat in my chair, all lonely. But there were two guys in front of me talking about a guy from just up the road that fell 4 miles from an airplane and lived. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm kind of daydreaming in this in-service speech, and that can't be true. They mentioned that the man's daughter taught at the school where I just got hired, and her classroom was right next to mine. And she was the one person I'd gotten to know a little bit. So at the end of the day, I burst into the room and I said, oh my God, I heard this crazy story about your dad. This can't be true. And she's like, oh yeah, old Lean Gene the fighting machine. I'm like, what? So now I'm in my mid-20s. I'm this rookie history teacher. I'm so excited. And I'm teaching American history that year. I said, well, we got to have a Gene Moran Day, and we'll do posters, and we'll get media down here. We'll make a big event. I'm doing my first big project. And she looked at me, and she was an art teacher. I remember she dropped a ream of construction paper on the table, and she said, nope, we don't go there. And just like that, my balloon popped. And I later learned, too, I didn't know at the time, but Joni herself, one of Gene's daughters, was not interested in a veteran story. Her husband was a Vietnam veteran, a wounded Vietnam veteran, paralyzed Vietnam veteran. He'd been shot in the back by a friendly fire, and he had just died of a heart attack the month before I was hired at North Crawford. So here's this crazy story. All my life, I've been an airplane buff and a World War II buff, and I don't get to hear about it. A couple days later, Joni walked into my classroom. She set this newspaper article on my table. I think she felt kind of badly about, brushing me off so brusquely. And she goes, well, here you go. If this is all I got, you find out anything else about my dad, you'll know more than my brothers and sisters. And the article's from 1992 La Crosse Tribune. And up there is the airplane, the type that Gene flew in World War II. He was a tail gunner, sat in the back. That's a B-17 Flying Fortress. And every Father's Day, in fact, they still do it, La Crosse has an air show at the airport. And sometimes the Blue Angels are there, sometimes World War II planes are there. And Gene went up to see his old plane, very unbeknownst to no one, took a friend up there. Now later when Gene and I got to work, I took that article to him and I called him out. I said, you don't look real happy here. Take a look at this. Does he look happy about having to do this story? He was not. And a reporter somehow caught wind of the story, asked if he could do a picture and stories. Now he's at an air show. He doesn't want to be bothered. And he looked at him. He goes, yeah, I told the reporter. 1 picture, 3 questions. That's all that's there. Okay? And that's all the family had since World War II. Now, Gene did become famous during World War II. All of these articles are from 1944 when Gene was a prisoner of war. The story had leaked back to the United States. The Associated Press picked it up in New York City, and it was in newspapers all across the country. The one on the left is from New York. You can see the one in the middle is from St. Paul, and the one on the right is from Baltimore. These were all sent to his parents' home, and he's a prisoner of war. He has no idea this is happening, and people often did that in World War II. They'd cut out articles, and they would send it to the state or the city, wherever the people lived. So those articles, by the way, are over there. And when Gene came home, he didn't know that his story had gotten out, and he just gets off the troop train in Madison, of all places, where his family's going to pick him up. And a Wisconsin State Journal reporter tracked him down. And he did a short story. That story's over there, too. Very short story. That's on the far right there. And he shut down for 60 years. Nothing other than that one I just showed you earlier, until 2007. I don't know if anyone recognizes that man there. He is Congressman Ron Kind. He was our 3rd District Congressman for about 25 years. He just retired. And he did something called the Veterans Oral History Project. He went around Western Wisconsin, interviewed veterans, recorded their stories for the Library of Congress to save all these veteran stories. He called up Gene one day personally, and Gene agreed. And then Gene's daughter, Joni, called me and said, oh my God, Dad's going to talk. Congressman Kind got him to talk. And at the airport, you're invited. Come up to La Crosse. And Joni's so breathless she can barely talk. And to set this story right, if Joni, who's the main character in this story, Joni is to conversation what water is to Niagara Falls. Constant, voluminous, and her dad's the opposite. And take a look at that headline. He meant it. All right, one last time. Now, Ron was nice enough to come to my book launch party 3 years ago. We had quite a party in La Crosse. And he said, yes, I remember that. Of course I remember that interview. He said it didn't go very well. And I was at the interview. It went 15 minutes, and then Gene just shut it down and stopped. He said, nope, I'm done. Let's get out of here. That was it. Now, he did walk outside of the airport where Ron kind of had arranged a Flying Fortress airplane to give him a plane ride. Now, you have to understand there's media on the other side of me as I'm taking this picture. There's TV cameras and newspaper reporters. But my two sons jumped out and took a picture with, quote, Grandpa Gene. I say quote, it's not their biological grandpa. Both my wife and I had lost our fathers early, so my sons did not have grandfathers. And as we began to know Gene and his family, Gene kind of took these boys under his wing, and he attended their birthday parties and first communions. My wife made sure to always have his favorite Blatz beer there at every event we had. I'm glad you're shaking your head when you say Blatz beer. This is a crowd that would understand Blatz beer. And so anyway, Gene, we took this picture. Gene got into that door right there. We see the red dot. This time he got to sit in front. They did a 20-minute ride over the Mississippi River Valley, landed the plane, and we're all waiting, and he gets out that plane door. The reporters rushed up to him, and he waved them off. He's like, nope, that's it. I'm never doing this again. And I don't think he was just talking about a plane ride. So this is '07, and I'm like, all right, the seal's broke. Can we get this story out of him? And I kept pestering the family. Even some of his Legion buddies were like, you got to talk. I didn't tell Gene directly. And one of the family members said, well, Smarty Pants, why don't you write it? You want this so badly. And I laughed at such a notion, and I said no. Flatly no. I remember it very well. And that's why, even though this is, 140, 150 presentation, I always feel like a bit of a phony. I've met so many writers, and I know how hard it is to get a book published. I never wanted to do this. That's the irony of me being here. Now, as Katie mentioned at the beginning, I do have some writing experience. I graduated from Madison with a journalism degree. And I wrote for newspapers for 2 years before I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And so I went back. I loved the experience, did it for 2 years, got to meet lots of people, great stories from my classroom. And this is kind of a misleading slide here. Rarely did I get front page bylines or my picture, okay? I can't tell you how many wrestling and basketball games I did at local high schools. Small stuff. If there's a barn fire, I was on it, My point is I did not have the writing experience for such a story. Not only that, when the family asked me, this is my wife was fighting cancer at the time. Now, the cancer was in remission, and I had her blessing to go ahead with it, but I wasn't sure. I'd still said no. And in that same year then, now let's move up to 2010, another school year, Joni comes running up to me and says, guess what? Dad's agreed to a book. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Tell me, who's your author? What do you got? Author, you. I said, Joni, I already gave me my answer. And in words, I see Joni quite a bit, and we remember the quote very well. She goes, John, Dad's not going to do it unless you do it. So this is August. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. Finally, in December, I got up the courage to maybe talk to Gene about this. Now, how do you butter up a rural World War II veteran in Wisconsin? And you take him to a fish fry and get him Blatz beer, okay? Right? I did 2 speeches in Boston in the spring. And the fish fry comment didn't get any kind of laugh. I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Friday night, fish fry, Wisconsin, Blatz beer, do you not? Different culture, okay? So this is Gene and I knew each other well by this point, but we never talked about the war until this night. I'm going to read to you how that went. I drove straight from my school and parked in front of the tavern. I sat in my dark vehicle. The car thermometer registered a mere 10 degrees. The last shards of pink sky faded tonight. I hadn't eaten in hours, but I had no appetite. Of course, I'd shared meals with Gene before, but this time the stakes were so high. I stared at the red and white neon Budweiser sign in the tavern window and wrestled with my self-doubt. I'm not a writer. I spend 50-plus hours a week at my school. I have 2 growing sons, and the question that shadowed everything, as it had for 8 years, would my wife's cancer return? But if I didn't write Gene's story, who would? I headed into the tavern. The place was full. Men nursing cans of Bud Light and Coors Light sat on bar stools that ringed the oval bar. Joni had already staked out a table in the rear of the dining room. Gene wore his usual bib overalls and his Army Air Corps baseball cap. Joni kept the conversation light, but I said little. The waitress jotted down our orders for beer and soda. Gene asked for his usual Blatz. The smell of fried cod and steaming baked potatoes arriving at our table helped settle my nerves a bit, but now it was time to talk book. I looked at Gene and swallowed. Yeah, I was thinking about starting after Christmas, on Thursdays after school for an hour or so. What do you think? Will that work, I asked. Gene kept eating, not looking at me. That would be fine, John. Yeah, exactly. But his eyes were riveted on his fish. I said, yeah, I'd like to get in a lot of interviews before spring, before it gets busy on my farm. But then as soon as school gets out and summer, we can pick back up with the interviews. Gene nodded, didn't say anything. Yeah, I wanted to start talking mostly about you growing up on the farm. We can move to the war later. Now, I had hoped to talk of his childhood instead of the war to put Gene at ease. But I could sense Joni was getting restless. Dad, she burst out, there's so much you haven't told anybody. She rushed on. You need to talk about your prisoner of war days and the shipwright when the Germans transferred you. We know nothing about that. Gene stopped eating and slowly set his fork down. He set both his arms on the table, looked up, and sat back in his chair. I didn't like what was happening. Joni's mention of that ship had stirred something in Gene. I closed my eyes and said to myself, Jesus Christ, Joni, shut up. You're moving too fast. But she pressed on, firing questions, rapidly talking, oblivious to her father's changed mood. Then Gene turned toward his daughter and roared, there are some things that are never going into any book. Everybody at the table froze. Nearby diners stopped talking. I didn't know what to say or do. Just 5 minutes into this project, it was already blowing up in my face. Gene, I said at last, this is your story. We don't need to do this. Gene quietly picked up his Kenneblatz and took a sip. He studied me for a moment, then his face softened. John, if we don't do it now, it'll never happen. So, true to his word, he kept his word. 1 month later, we're going to start this. And for those who've read Tailspin, this is where it comes from. For 3 years, on and off, this is where Gene and I worked. I always tell everyone this is my favorite slide of the presentation. One of the great stories of World War II, a man that did so much for his community and country. He's a very humble man. Now, he did raise his family in a larger home in Soldiers Grove, but he retired to this mobile home. Tailspin comes from a trailer park. But before you make any judgments about the simplicity of this man, why don't you take a look at his resume. He's a decorated World War II veteran, obviously. He started a trucking business after the war with the GI Bill, but his physical injuries were quite extensive in the war, and back then trucking was a very physical job, and he had to give that up. He worked for the post office for 30 years. Was the hometown fire chief for Soldiers Grove, Wisconsin for 30 years. Started the first ambulance crew in Crawford County. Was on the county board government for Crawford County for 20 years. American Legion for 68 years. First ever recipient of the Wisconsin Veterans Lifetime Achievement Award, personally given to him by the governor of Wisconsin at the time. And so, again, this Tailspin comes from not a mansion on a golf course, from a trailer park, and that resume. I'm going to start Gene's resume here, October 43 during World War II, when he was sent to war. So Gene was stationed in England. I don't think he got to flirt with the Princess Elizabeth then, but he was sent to England, and with the famed 8th Air Force. I know there's some history buffs out there and some World War II people that the 8th Air Force is the largest Air Force ever put together in terms of men and number of planes. It's at a time when the Nazis dominated the continent. This is October 43, so we're about 9 months before D-Day. This is at a time when the Americans are trying to win the war with massive bomber campaigns to try and knock out Germany's war industry. There's a problem in 1943. It's not working. American planes were getting down by the dozens and hundreds. And when Gene first got there, 25 of these very dangerous missions were required of each airman before you were done. When Gene got there, only 1/3 were finishing their tour of duty. I talked to a lacrosse World War II veteran who's now dead. He said, yeah, when I got there, the tech sergeant said, we stood in a line, and the tech sergeant said, look to your left, look to your right. Now look at yourself. Only one of you are going home. That's how bad it was in October of 1943. The German Air Force was clearly winning. And Gene said when he got there, I was told, for most of us, it's not if you'd go down, but when. So he came in at a very bad time for American Air Forces. This is Gene's crew right here. Gene is in the upper left-hand corner. He is the tail gunner, and he's 19 years old. Andy over here is 19. Let's see. Pee-wee just turned 20. Sweeto's 20. The oldest gunner there is Walter Reed, 23. By the way, not that Walter Reed, not the hospital surgeon guy. Walter Reed's a chicken farmer from Nebraska. And I had the pleasure of speaking at his hometown last year. It was quite an event there. The officers are on the bottom. The pilot there is 21 years old. I'm going to say that again. The pilot is 21 years old. The old man of the crew, Benny, is 27. This is not unusual. this was such a massive campaign that happened so fast, and World War II was just so large, and it was not unusual to have crews this young. In fact, it was the norm. This is Gene's airplane, the Rikki Tikki Tavi. As I was telling Katie before, I do a lot of school speeches, but I have to edit that picture on the right there a little bit. I do. I put up a little electronic rectangle over that. And it was actually, this is his plane, and I can't take credit for finding it. It was Gene's uncle who did some research for me, and he found his plane. He goes, I think I found Uncle Gene's plane. Sent the picture to me. So at one of our Thursdays with Gene interviews, I put the picture down in front of him. I said, is this your airplane? Grabbed the magnifying glass. He went right to it, looked at the girl. Oh, yeah, that's the Dolly. Now, Rikki Tikki Tavi is you can barely see the name of the plane right there. It's a mongoose. It's a fictional mongoose from a Rudyard Kipling story. It's a mongoose who protects a British colonial boy in India during British colonial times. And, but that's his plane, the Rikki Tikki Tavi. That's Gene, picture he took right before he left for Europe and the war. And yeah, Rikki Tikki Tavi, the cartoon character. And then on November 29th, 1943, Gene was involved in his 5th mission. He had been up many times before that, but for a mission to count, you had to drop the bombs on the target or a secondary target. There are other times he was up and they didn't get credit for it, but this is his 5th mission over Bremen, Germany. I've been to Bremen as part of my research for this book. Bremen's about the size of Milwaukee, and like Milwaukee once was an industrial town, very heavily defended. Gene's plane made it to the target, dropped its bombs, and then on the way home that afternoon, something happened. I'm about to show you what happened now with a video here. This is an animated video of what happened to Gene in his plane that afternoon. One of the questions I often get is, how do you know he fell 4 miles? Well, I have, as part of my research for the book, I have Gene's mission records, all of his mission records, which are now declassified, and any historian or writer can get them from National Archives. And they were assigned to fly at 29,000 feet that day, which is about 5 miles, and Gene figured they lost about a mile of altitude in the air battle that you just witnessed. So I don't know for sure, roughly 4.5, 3.5, somewhere around there, before the plane broke apart. One of the things he always wanted to clear up, some rumor went around that he lost consciousness, but he said he never lost consciousness the whole time of the air battle and the fall that you just saw. I said he fell very, very fast, so fast that his teeth fillings popped out from the change of the pressure. Blood rushed into his eyes because he was falling so fast. He was partially blinded for several days. And he landed on the ground. He landed in a forest in northwestern Germany and thought he was dead. When he crawled out, it's kind of, his vision's kind of blurry, and he crawls out, but he could feel the cold air, and he starts grabbing leaves and twigs. And then he told me he started laughing. I'm like, laughing? He goes, I just started laughing out loud that I cheated death. He said he rolled onto his back, and now he's trying to process what they're supposed to do is hide your parachute. Of course, that's not a problem for him. And they're supposed to find the local resistance and plan an escape. Gene rolled over into his back. And as you saw in the video, he was shot several times. But he had a strange sensation coming from his head, and he went up to feel it. And he felt a gelatinous mass, which was his brain. His skull had split wide open. So he knew he wasn't going anywhere. He would soon be captured. And I've been to the exact spot where Gene fell. So this is northwestern Germany, and on the 75th anniversary, this is the city where his plane blew up. You saw in the video, so the tail split off, plane kept flying, and it blew up over a city of about 25,000. Showered the city with debris, set fires all over the city, and was quite a day in that city's history. So on the 75th anniversary, they invited 30-plus Americans, Gene's family, friends, other members, family members of the crew, and myself for a 40th celebration, which they paid for, and it was quite shocking. They did this, and we had a tour bus and food, oh my gosh, and they gave us a tour of the whole story, and they took us to the woods, and we just walked around. And it was raining out that day, and those are Gene's grandchildren there, and there's other people there, and there's other people on the other side of this picture, and I'm actually standing right there. You can see a boom mic right there from a television crew. And it was a German television crew that was doing the story on us. And they said, well, you're the author. Tell us how he survived. And I looked around at this woods. Now, I was expecting, mountainsides, big bushy pine trees, or something that would cushion that fall. But it looks like where I'm from in central Wisconsin, just flat, marshy woods. And I told the reporter, I have no idea how you survived. But at this point, I think I'm going to let Gene talk about his fall.
Were you still conscious?
Oh, yeah.
Were you stuck up there?
No. When it settled in, I caught it on the upswing. I caught the tree.
You caught the tree, yeah.
They said let in a tree. I didn't light in no tree. I lit again the tree.
You laid against the tree?
Against the tree on the upswing of the...
Okay. When you were twisting out, you're coming to...
Yeah,
Okay.
and this open part was down on the ground.
Okay, that makes sense.
And
Okay.
I crawled out the open part. Because then this open part dropped right down on the ground.
And then the open part kind of slid into the ground.
And I got turned around and crawled out. And by that time, the Frenchmen were there.
That fast?
Yeah. Oh, hell, they were watching the whole thing.
This might confuse you. I said he was shot down over northwestern Germany. What are Frenchmen doing there? These were French prisoner of wars. Gene had happened to be shot down nearby a prisoner of war camp. Now, the Germans would let the French out for work detail, also to scrounge for food under armed guard. France is occupied at the time. There's not much of an escape risk. There's no place for them to go. So the French learned to scavenge off of downed Allied planes, which there were tons of them, particularly American planes, because you find any dead bodies on them, those guys always carried Hershey bars with them. So these were scavengers, French prisoners of war that were scavengers that found Gene in the woods. And they watched that tail section fall, and they went to get some goodies. But Gene was alive.
And I'll quickly between the time you crawled out and the Frenchmen were there?
Well, it could have been over 5 minutes.
5 minutes, because they'd been watching.
They'd been watching. They were just jabbering and going on, pointing at the sky, pointing at me, and pointing at the tail of the plane.
Well,
I never knew why we slid back that day. I'll never know to this all. I will never know.
slid back.
We were right up in formation. Just, of course, they were just shooting at us something terrible everywhere, but we're still up.
Oh, wait, the day you slid back, the day you got shot down?
Yeah. And we slid back, kept sliding back. And I even called and I said, what's the matter? We're not staying up in formation. We're being pushed out. Well, I don't know what he meant by being pushed out or what, whoever answered me, I can't remember. But boy, when we got pushed out.
Is that when the fighters all started hopping on you then? Yeah. When you guys started falling back, how many fighters were starting to hit you guys?
Well, I was shooting. Both waist gunners were shooting. The ball turret gunner was shooting. The top turret gun guy was shooting. And I believe the bombardier. No, he had that little gun poked out to one
the side.
I believe he was shooting too.
Yep. After Pee Wee hit and Orson's pushing the bombardier out, is the plane sustaining any damage at this point?
Oh, it's just getting rid of it.
Just
It wasn't the one that came up underneath. It was one that drifted in that came in. Oh, I could even see his scarf and his goggles.
you said you could see a scarf in his goggles.
Yeah, and he pointed down.
So yes, that is what you think it is. That's a German fighter plane whose job it is to destroy Gene. He pulled up next to him in the middle of this air battle. And I remember Gene telling me the story. Nobody knew, but his kids didn't know about the story. And I'm just, my jaws hit the floor. I'm like, what? I'm like, how close was he to you? Looks at the living room, the television, about meted the TV away. So that's a German fighter pilot up there. They pulled up next to him and they just stared at each other for a while.
He pointed down.
And you didn't know why he pointed
No,
down?
I figured he meant bail out.
Bail out. Okay.
That's what I figured he meant, but somebody cut loose up in front.
But you got to remember, I got a bone sticking out of this arm.
Oh, I didn't know. When did that happen?
Oh, that happened through the mission. See, it started here and come up here, and I got bone sticking up through.
When did that happen in the mission?
On that mission.
But I mean, at what point did
Hell, I don't know. I was too busy.
Which
Yeah, a couple bullets went through both forearms as he was firing and snapped them both.
This one here was, oh, hell, it was all bleeding out through the suit.
When did you get hit? I didn't know you'd been hit before that.
Oh, God, I was hit 3 or 4 times. I had all these ribs broke. And then I started to crawl up to get, I had a chest suit laying right in front of the tail wheel. Yet I crawled up to get that, and all at once it just started down, and you can't move. And all at once it broke in two, and I'm looking right out into space.
Gene said his head was right here.
young man. He said, you come back with any more of these forged papers. And he said, you won't need to have to worry about going into service. He said, I admire you for wanting to get into service this bad. But he said, you forged any more papers. And he said, I'll have you put where you won't need to worry about the service. So. Home, and I went home, and I said, well, I'm in the service now. How could you? We didn't sign for you. Well, I said, I forged your names. But we can get that road. No, I said, you can't. I'm already sworn in, and I wasn't. But I said, you'd make it a lot easier for me if you would sign these papers in case they ever come back and check on it. Well, if you're that determined to go and get yourself killed, we'll sign it. It's the most beautiful thing to go up above them, get above them clouds and see the sun. Oh, wow. It looks just like a city. That is the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen in my life.
How did you check if oxygen worked? How did you check that?
You know, if you had a little hangover, you just done hooked, and you stuck that in your mouth, and then you turned the valve. And if your head cleared right up, and the oxygen was working. Oh my God. The oxygen was working.
I mentioned Gene's from Wisconsin, right? Next, okay.
Otherwise, we called everybody by our first name.
You did, officers too?
Oh, yeah. There was no, we were a family, a tight
And
band.
that's what made you guys such good friends.
You didn't, if they didn't live, you didn't live.
Okay.
That's Gene in the circle right there. There was one other survivor out of that crew of 10. Jesse right down here, the navigator. I could have written a book about Jesse too. When the plane blew up, he blew out that plexiglass nose there because he was up in front and survived that explosion. I mean, the plane blew up, he survived that explosion. He was severely wounded as well and fell into a tree in that city I told you about. And when we went over there, Jesse's son didn't know he was going to do this, got to unveil a historical marker dedicated to his father. This was the Germans 75 years later. And yeah, as you can see, Gene's a colorful guy. I could be here all afternoon with quotes from him. But I'm going to move on. So these always happen on Thursdays with Gene. And one day I told Gene, I said, Gene, all right, we're going to get out of the mobile home here. I want a field trip. I want you to take me to the farm that raised you. And the barn where Gene, right there it is. It's still up. He started hand milking cows there at age 8 during the Great Depression. The house where he grew up is still there. Someone's actually remodeling it right now. A year ago, I stopped by the house because the house had kind of gone into ill repair, but someone was fixing it up. And I stopped to knock and introduce myself, and she said, yes, we got a bone to pick with you. I'm like, what? Do you know how many times we're interrupted by tailspin tourists? I said, I'm sorry. Get used to it. But yeah, I mean, actually, they're very gracious, and they've had lots of people that have read the book and stopped by to see Gene's farm. And this is my wife I brought my wife and boys along on this trip. And we took this picture about a week after this picture was taken of Gene and my wife. They were very close. He constantly flirted with her, and she made sure to have his Blatz beer whenever we got together. And but my wife, a week after this, we were outside doing yard work, and she came up to me and said, something's very wrong with me. And I'm like, you look fine. And she sat down, stared off into the distance, and just became catatonic. And my sons came running up to her, and they'd been through this routine before. They said, Mom, what's our name? Mom, who's the president? And she couldn't answer any of the questions. And then her left cheek started throbbing violently. And I realized she was having a seizure. I took her to the local hospital at Viroqua. They sedated her. I called her oncologist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, where she was getting her health care at the time. And her oncologist said, get her up here immediately. And that was a Sunday. On Monday morning, we had a brain scan, as we'd often done the years before. And then we had the meeting with the doctor that afternoon, and we walked into a room a little bit smaller than this. He put the brain scan up on a screen like this, and that brain scan lit up like a Christmas tree. There were tumors and lines of cancer everywhere. We'd been dealing with one tumor and always managed to get it with surgery, but that day I looked at the neurosurgeon and said, "We really don't need you anymore, do we?" He said, "No, you don't." She died 6 months later, right before Christmas, and Jean and I are about a year and a half into the book, and I don't know what's going to happen to the book at this point. I'm now a widower with 2 middle school age boys. Don't know what's going to happen with Jean's story. And what turned it around was this woman right here. Anyone that's had any writing experience knows that a good book always has a great editor. And I met Heather at a writers conference here in Madison. And I was, recently widowed, kind of lost. I had no experience in this. It's not my world. I felt very out of place, but she sought me out. She had heard about the story, and she said, "I'm here looking at 25 other projects, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to choose you. What are you going to do with this book?" And I'm stunned. I'm like, I said, "Well, I think I'm just going to type it up what I got the best I can, and I'm going to hand it over to the family. They can self-publish it or just keep it in the family. They can do with it what they want. I got a different life now." And she said, "I don't think so. You need to see this through. This needs to be a real book. I will be your editor." She said, "But you need to get an agent. You need to get a publisher. This has to become a real book," as she said. And she said she had written 4 books herself. The first one was a bestseller with a big New York publisher. But she told me, she said, "Good books take time." And I said, what are you looking at? She goes, "It's going to take you 5 to 10 years if we do it right." Now, Gene's 88. Does he have 5 to 10 years? Now, this is where the story gets a little Hollywood. Follow me. Gene had a heart attack that very weekend. When I'm in Madison, he was visiting family and friends near Madison. So they rushed him to a hospital in Madison. And it was Saturday when I first got news, and I wanted to see him, and the family said no. On Sunday, I called again. He was at the VA hospital in Madison, and I said, "I got to see him. I'm not family, but I got to see him." They gave you permission, and I'm only a few blocks away. I'm on State Street, and he's at the VA hospital, and I get there. I didn't even wait for the elevator. I sprinted upstairs. He was on the 3rd floor. Got the room number from the nurse, and I'm going down the hallway. And I'm preparing myself. I'm like, okay, well, this might be it. He might be dead. I might hear his last words today. He might just barely be breathing. Took a deep breath, walked into the room, and this is what I saw. By the way, Gene's son Mike was there. He can confirm the story. I walked in and he looks at me, "Hey, John, get a load of this." So, yeah. That is Miss Wisconsin from that year and Miss Teen Wisconsin that came to the VA hospital to cheer up the war hero. We took the picture. I said, "Thank you, ladies, but please leave before he has another heart attack." And Gene sat down on that bed. You can see the bed right there. And I sat in a chair next to Gene's son. And I said, "Well, somebody wants to make a big deal of your story. It's going to take 5 to 10 years. This is your call. What do you want to do?" He didn't wait long for me to say, and I wrote this in the book for those who read it. He said, "If I don't read it down here, I'll read it up there." So we're going to do it. Now I'm putting this, if any of you ever heard of this book right here, Unbroken, another World War II narrative? Yes. So it just came out, and I wanted to write it in this style because it reads like fiction. But my editor said, "Well, you had Thursdays with Gene. This sounds like the book Tuesdays with Maury. She said, we got to get him. He's a funny guy. We got to get him in the book as an old man." I said, "Oh, okay." And then she said, "Wait, in the middle of all this, as we're putting this together, your wife died of cancer?" I said, "Yes." "Gene and your wife were close?" "Yes, they were." "Well, that has to be part of the story too." And then I said, "No." I said, "I live this. I'm not writing her story too." And she said, "John, there's been so many books on World War II the last 25 years. This is going to make it so unique." And I looked at her, I said, I've never written one book. Now you got me writing 3 stories. I don't know if this is going to work. If you allow me one moment of a modesty. Now this is a different picture than I showed when I first started. So those are 2 awards that are now on the book cover. They're national awards. And I also won the 2023 Wisconsin Library Association Book of the Year. I'm bragging a bit, but my point is it did work. I didn't think it would. And a lot of people say it's not just a World War II book, it's a relationship book. I remember I went to a bookstore once and the owner said, "I don't know how to shelve this book. World War II, men's relationship?" I said, "Yes." And based on that, and this is where I'll end and then I'll take questions. it's these relationships that I really explore in the book. These are the characters of the book. So this is his air crew that he lost in that terrible day. And the two guys on his right are his best friends from his prisoner of war time. And obviously, when you're interviewing someone about these people, it's extremely difficult. Some days it works and some days it doesn't. Some days I had to leave early. But he always used this term. He always called them his brothers. And he always said that term, we were closer than brothers. And so based on that, my publisher made a video, a promotional video for Tailspin, which I'm about to show you, and where I'll end tonight. So if you haven't read Tailspin, you're about to meet the characters of Tailspin. Give me one moment to set it up. And give me one moment to lose my vanities. I put my glasses on. All right, there we go. Well, everyone, that's the story of Tailspin. Thank you very much for coming today.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. This was amazing. Let's give him another huge round of applause. So moving. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we have some time and I have a microphone, so if you have any questions, raise your hand. I will come to you and you can ask it on the microphone so we can hear it in the recording, okay?
I don't think I need a mic. I just want to say a friend of mine recommended John's book several months ago to me, and it's a fabulous book. If any of you haven't read it, do. It's just a great
Thank you for your
experience.
support. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have you thought about making this into a movie? I think it would. I'm serious. This would be great.
I wish I had $1 for every time that question were asked. So actually, I have a meeting on that in a couple weeks. So I've been, well, hang on. There is a screenwriter in LA that's very interested in beginning the beginnings of this project. And we're actually kind of stuck right now. We've met with several producers and we get the same story. Love the story, too expensive. So we're kind of stuck right now. We've had a few bites, but right now, just this would be a very, war movies are always incredibly expensive. So we've been kind of stuck right now, but my publisher is still trying, and we have a screenwriter that's working on the project, so we'll see. But right now, nothing.
Thank you. So he's laying on the ground with his brain outside his head. He gets taken to the POW camp, and a friend at the POW camp calls him Baldy because he got brain surgery.
Right, they shaved his head at this POW camp.
They
Is that-
really did that surgery on him in a POW camp?
Yes, they did. It's there should be another book about the two doctors that did it. They were Serbian prisoners of war that stayed at this prison camp, and it was kind of like, you remember the TV show MASH? They did like the museum is the prisoner of war camp is now a museum. I toured it as part of my book, met with the curator, and he knew the story of Gene and the doctors, and said, yeah, those two doctors did about 30, 40 surgeries a day. And yeah, they dumped Gene to him and they said, good luck. And they're like, let's give it a try, see if we can put this guy back together. And they did.
Were they American doctors?
Serbian doctors. They're from Yugoslavia.
They were prisoners also?
They were prisoners of war. Yep. And one of them actually saved, I don't want to get too far off track, one of them saved the life of the prison camp commandant. The German commandant was so grateful, he said, I will let you go home. And he said, nope, I'm not going home till all my men go home. So he and the other guy stayed there for most of the war and were the camp doctors working on the POWs.
Anyone else? Well, here, it helps.
Did Sergeant Moran choose to be buried at Arlington?
No, he wanted to be buried at his hometown church. And lots of people that read the book go visit the grave. I get calls and emails all the time. Can you give us directions? So, yep, outside 5 miles south of Soldiers Grove in the cemetery of St. Philip's Catholic Church. And, yep, lots of people.
Grove had flooding.
Yep.
Before they moved?
That was after they moved. So in the 70s, there was a major flood there, and they moved the whole
Right,
district
the whole-
to an uptown, to a higher ground area. Yep, so that, yeah, it's that city, yep.
I was just going to say, if you read the book, and I did, and I made copies of the pages of where Gene was buried, and ironically enough, yesterday we went to Gays Mills and we found the grave site and the church and everything, and the road that goes right down by their farm.
By the house, yeah, it's a gravel road,
Yeah,
so good luck if it's muddy.
It isn't graveled anymore.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No, they've paved
They
it.
did, all
Yes,
right.
they did.
I was there about a little over a year ago the last time I was there,
Yep.
so all right, good to know, thank you.
Anyone else? Right here?
My name is John O'Donnell. I grew up one farm in between us and Gene Moran. He's 10 years older than we were. My oldest brother was 3 years. And I just remember in September 44, there was word back to Rolling Ground that Gene was in prison and alive. And Bert Eaton and Levon ran that store. And it was on a Saturday, if I remember right, or I was walking home from school. And she went to every neighbor, and she jumped up on the wagon, pointed the machinery, and said, "Gene is alive." And I just remember that.
I needed to meet you 10 years ago. That would have been a great story for the book. Thank you.
So the book is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you for that story. I'll share that with the family.
Oh, up here.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book. I, too, have read it, and I know a lot of others who have. One question I have, and it's not that big or important of a deal, but just wondering, Gene obviously wanted to fly. He went, forged his signature. He knew what he had to go through to get that, and didn't work twice, and he stuck with it. And it was his love of flying.
Mm-hmm.
Had he flown?
No. And he said he had to make a decision when he got into the Army Air Corps. He knew that, he said, he was kind of a class clown. He said, yeah, my report card ran pretty heavy with C's and D's, so I didn't think I was going to qualify for pilot training. And when they started asking for gunners, he said he jumped at that immediately because he at least wanted to get into the plane. And this was in 42 when they're really trying to recruit all these gunners and pilots. And he said, I would have been, he didn't want, he's young and he thinks nothing's going to happen. He didn't want a desk job, he said. He didn't want to be stateside. He wanted to be where the action was. Of course, he had no idea what he was getting into. So he signed up to be a gunner when he had a chance. And that's how he ended up as the tail gunner.
Right. Yeah, interesting that he said he loved flying and he had never flown.
Nope. Like a lot of that generation. First time they were in a plane was when they went to war.
Yeah.
How has writing this story and talking about it changed your life?
Oh, boy. Wow. You know what? I'll be glad to answer that question when I come up with an answer someday. It just seems like a dream. It's just been 3 years, like I mentioned, but I got to be near 150 of these speeches now. I got 3 next week. I don't know when someday I'll sit down. I guess my biggest 2 things, I'm happy for the family because they didn't know anything and now they do. But I'm also, at the end of the book is that terrible death march Gene was in. Very few people know about that. Even World War II buffs don't know about that. And that's because in 45, the Holocaust and the finding of those horrible camps is dominating the headlines. These death marches that were happening at the time that Gene was in, where they lost, as bad as the Bataan death march, lost 1,000 guys, got ignored. And I think Tailspin has brought some attention to those guys that went through that, so I'm happy about that too.
And could you say just a little bit about the boat? Weren't they on a boat?
Yes, the Hell Ship. Yep.
Hell Ship.
And I actually interviewed 2 guys, Gene, and then there was a lacrosse veteran who died a few years ago that was on that Hell Ship. And I'll just say those were very difficult interviews, tough to get. And I found other sources. Bill Dorgan from Richland Center, his son gave me some things his dad wrote about it, so that was one of my sources as well. But that was those were very difficult. And to be honest, when I asked Gene about it, he chased me out of the house one time. He kind of made up an excuse. He had to be somewhere and told me to leave. And once I researched the Hell Ship, I figured out why. So.
Okay, we have another question here.
Early in the program, you said that Gene said he would not tell everything that he knew about that. Were there things that he left out that he did not share with you?
I'm sure there are, particularly from the Death March. There's just, so that you have not just the prisoners of war, but all the refugees trying to escape the vengeful Russian army coming through Poland and Eastern Germany. There's just constant death and destruction. I mean, they're being strafed by their own planes sometimes, and there's children and elderly people in these crowds, in these refugee columns, and that Gene was involved in. It was just it's just a horrible mess. And those are tough interviews. I'm trying to get details from him, and he was sketchy at times, and we'd move on. So, yeah, I'm sure there are things from that death march that we're never going to know.
Anyone else?
Have you considered writing another book?
I got an idea I'm looking at. I'm not sure right now. Tailspin's kept me so busy. I've been on the road so much, but I'm looking at another story right now, and we'll see if the people want to do it or not. But thinking about it, just beginning stages. That'll wrap it up.
I think so. So, what do you want to explain the book?
Sure, and if there are more questions, I'm here as long as Katie wants me here. I'll be sitting in that chair signing, and I'll take more questions if you want one-on-one, and apparently she's got cookies and coffee for you, so thank you very much, and I'll be over here. Thank you.